Hi everyone and welcome back to another card making video. Today I'm creating two Christmas cards and at the same time I'm playing with the new waffle flower mats. Now these are silicone mats that you can see they come in a variety of sizes, and it is a new product in the market that will help you hold your project down, especially when you are doing ink blending with your stencils. It can be used also for placing it inside your MISTI, your stamping platform, so that you don't use magnets anymore. It is also a great way to use it as a gel plate for mixed media techniques. You can also use it to place your ink pads on top so that they don't move around while you are inking. So you will see lots of videos with many designers showcasing these new products. You can see them in action, decide if it's something for you, and then you can choose the best size. In the packaging along with the grip mat, you will also find grid mats that you can use. You can stick them at the back if you like. This is going to help you align your project. Me, just because I'm not very into perfect alignment, since I'm more into mixed media projects, I don't care about that. I'm just going to stick that directly inside my MISTI. Now, for me, I find that I will be using this size that fits perfectly inside the MISTI. This is really easy to clean up. Remember, it's the exact same material as your silicone stamps, so you already know how to clean them. Dye inks, distress inks, oxide inks are not going to leave any residue. If you use pigment inks or any other permanent ink, it will stain your mat, but that's not an issue. It's going to still work perfectly fine. Also keep in mind that this is going to be sticky all the time. It's not like the other mats that lose their stickiness over time. With that, all you have to do is to just clean it off with some baby wipe or just wash it in the sink and it's going to be sticky again. Now, if you want, you can just use it as it is without removing the back. I like to stick it on my glass mat so it sticks really beautifully there. It is really difficult to see, but trust me, it's there and it's super sticky. So it's not going to move or go anywhere else. And let's start creating cards. So first of all, I'm going to use, look how sticky it is, by the way. Anyway, I am going to use a set of stencils that has just been released by Waffle Flower. It's one of those stencils that you layer one on top of the other, you play with different colors, and you already know which stencil starts first, 1, 2, 3, 4, there are numbers on top of it, so it makes your job really easy. I am going to bring in a craft cardstock because I'm going for cards that have that vintage look and feel, and I'm going to start by sticking this down. You see, it doesn't move at all. By the way, I am using the 5.5 by 8.5 grip mat. I find that this is the best size for me for what I do. I like because it is larger than the area of a standard card, so it grips the card as well as the stencil. However, keep in mind there are add-on products that you can use to extend your stencil if you like. They are released by Waffle Flower and you can check them out in their website. So let's have some fun now. I'm going to add oxide inks over my craft cardstock and I'm using the blending brushes by Waffle Flower just because they are so tiny and they allow me to use different colors in all those areas without using masking at all. So I'm going to switch between colors and I'm staying with a palette that mainly has browns, greens and reds. I'm not going to link all the colors that I used, I just grabbed a few randomly. And also keep in mind that I'm using the oxide distress inks, which means that when they dry they are going to give that chalky finish on my project. If you don't want that, you can go with the original distress oxide inks. So my first layer is done. I'm going to align on top the second layer, really easy to align, and there are also lines around the design that help you align that with a 4.25 by 5.5 cardstock. Now I'm going to press it down, this is not going to move on me, and I'm going to move on to a darker distress oxide green and add the second layer on my trees and my poinsettia leaves. Also notice how my ink pad is moving around as I'm inking up my brush. Now this is where I got the idea that if I place it touching the grid mat, it's not going to move on me And you see it works just fine. Of course, for that you need a slightly bigger grip mat than your project that you are working for. That's why I like the 5.5 by 8.5 size. I find that it is perfect for what I usually do. I'm also adding a little bit of blue as a background for a couple of areas, and you can definitely skip some of the stencils. You don't have to use them all. For example, here you don't have to create the background. And the second layer is done. Here is how it looks up to now, and let's move on to the third layer with the stencil. Now once you finish with all the layering, it's going to give you 6 different images of postal stamps. These postal stamps can be used as they are all together in a panel, or you can cut them out and use them separately. Now here I'm still using the third layering stencil. This time I'm using white chalk ink so that I can add some snow through some of the areas there. And here is how it looks, and let's move on to the fourth and last layer of stencil. This is the one where you can go with pastes and add that extra touch. Here I'm going with pops of color. There are different colors available. They are by Scrapbook by the way, and the color that I'm using here is glitter gold. This product is great for creating dots that look like enamel dots for embellishments, but you can also use it as a paste, as you can see here, through a stencil. I just apply a line with my product, and then with a spatula I make sure that it goes over the stencil. Time to remove the stencil. I'm going to leave this dry, and in the meantime this is the die set that you can use to cut out all those images apart. And the die set not only gives you the big die but also smaller ones where you can use to create your very own postal stamps in all those different shapes. It always gives you that a lovely border of a postal stamp. I absolutely love the square one, and I know that I will be using it a lot. You can use it with every pattern paper you have to create your very own postal stamps. Now, of course, I need to remove my grip mat. I'm going to store it away, and of course don't throw away the acetate that comes with for the top and at the bottom, just to make sure that you keep it nice and clean. The gold glitter paste is now dry, so I'm going to place the die on top and run it through my die cutting machine. And once I remove this big die, you will see that it comes as a whole panel, so it doesn't cut out all the images. You can use it as it is on top of a card, add a sentiment, and you are good to go. However, since I did all that work with 4 stencils and so many colors, I want to make the most out of these. That's why I'm using my scissors to cut them out. And by separating them, I end up with 6 different postal stamps that you can use separately on 6 different cards, or you can combine them whichever way you like. Now you can also leave those images as they are, or if you like, you can use some postal stamps on top of them. And I find that this is going to add even more character into your postal stamps, plus it's going to make them look more interesting. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going for a vintage look and feel today, and I'm starting with a craft card base that's 4¼ by 5½. I'm going to ink up the edges with brown ink. I'm using coffee dye ink here by Stamperia, and I will repeat the same inking around the edges on a green panel that I have cut out, which is slightly smaller than my standard cut, as well as around all the postal stamps. On the green mat, I'm going to add my sentiment. For that, I'm going with a stamp set from an old release by Waffle Flower. I believe it's from last year, a Christmas release from last year. And I'm going to stamp that with Versamark ink and then white emboss it. You see, I'm using my MISTI and there is the grip mat inside. That's why I don't need to use magnets anymore. When I'm doing embossing, I always prep my paper with anti-static powder pillow, and then I stamp a couple of times just to make sure that I have a good impression. I applied my fine white embossing powder, and then I can use my heat gun to melt the sentiment. Also notice that I did go ahead and stamped a couple of leaves on vellum, again with Versamark ink, and I'm white embossing them. These are again from a Poinsettia stamp set from last year. Don't forget, when you are making Christmas cards, I'm sure you all have products from previous releases. Just grab them and see what you can mix and match with maybe new products that you buy for this year. Now I'm inking up very lightly the vellum as well as a tiny poinsettia that I cut out. I'm doing that because I don't want this to be super bright white, as I'm going for a more vintage look and feel. Now the poinsettia comes from another older set that gives you 3 different layers that you can stick one on top of the other to make a fluffy poinsettia. And then let's put the card together. I'm using green pattern paper from a Christmas pad by Waffle Flower. This is a design that I always repeat. I like to cut out the same size of panels so that I can layer one on top of the other on an angle. This way I end up having a little pop of color coming from behind. Now I do have foam tape in between those layers, so there is some dimension there. For the back I did use glue, and I'm going to place it directly on top of my card base. Then on top of that I'm going to place my focal point. In this case it's the DR postal stamp, and again I'm placing it on an angle just to make it look more interesting. I have the little poinsettia here. I'm just going to place it down, and then the vellum leaves that I'm going to tuck behind. For the center of my poinsettia, again I'm using the pops of color in the same color that I used on the postal stamps, and you can see how I put together a card by using only one of the postal stamps that I created with a stencil, which means that I can recreate the same idea with the rest of the stamps. And I'm going to show you what I mean. For this card I'm adding a few splatters. I like them because they read like snow. Of course this is a completely optional step, but I feel like it adds so much to the card. So here is a close-up look with all the dimension. Absolutely love this card, and now I'm going to show you how you can recreate the design, and it's going to give you a different look just by switching up the colors. So here again you see I have one of the poinsettias that I used for the first cut, only this time I have 2 layers, so it is a little bit fuller. I did the exact same design underneath, again with the same sentiment that I embossed, this time on red cardstock, and then at the back you can see a little bit of pattern paper in pink. I used pink and red because it matches the colors of my ornaments in the postal stamp. And you see pretty much the same design. I'm just switching the placement, like I have here my cluster on the right, while on the green card I had it on the left. Again I'm going to add some splatters. Here is a close-up on my red version of this design, and of course I still have 4 extra stamps that I can recreate this design to create similar cards with the same products. So these were the cards for today. I hope that you had fun, that you got inspired. Down below in the description you can find links to everything I used, just like always. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you all next time.